Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by and welcome to part 2 of the first round of project plant updates. It's the Dendrobium's turn this time, so it's a shorter video because there weren't so many selected, but nonetheless let's crack on and see what's changed. First one on the list then, Dendrobium alexandrae, a species Latoria type, and when we looked at this we were desperately waiting for these blooms to open, buds to open. They'd been there a very, very long time. They took an age to open. As far as the plant was concerned, there were no new growths. We were just waiting for those buds to open. They did finally open on the 8th of the 1st. So it'll be interesting to see how long they last. But yeah, no growths or anything to watch out for at that time. And now the blooms did finally open after an awful lot of wait. There's still no new growths around the base. Needs a repot, which it will get soon. Caught the light on that leaf there back in the heat wave. These blooms are stunning. I'm over the moon with these blooms. Well worth the wait. How long it's going to be before it blooms again, I really don't know, because at the moment there are no new growths showing. So that's the state of play with that one as of now. Next one on the list, this is a winter resting type, Dendrobium loddigesii, or gesii, however you want to say it. This was as it was going into its winter rest. The feed had been stopped back in November, water was being quite dramatically reduced in towards December, and it's had a trickle of water through the winter every now and again. Luckily there's quite a few bare roots on this, so I can water this very gently without actually getting the moss wet. We were expecting some leaf fall during the winter, as it is a deciduous type. There's some bare canes already there, and plenty of new growths during the previous season, so it's growing quite well, although it's still not a large plant. Okay, as you can see, it has lost a lot of leaves. That is natural. Which is quite good, I suppose. That's what it's supposed to do. It came into bloom at the beginning of April last year, but what's happening on this now is we've got new growths starting. They're only small at the moment, but they're there. Yeah, you can just see little green new growths coming out from near the base in quite a few places. So that's good, and on some of last year's growths there are nubbins, so the buds are starting to form now on quite a few canes, so I think we should have a reasonable blooming. It bloomed last year at the beginning of April, so it's got a way to go yet if it's going to stick to its season, but I was pleased with the growth last year. Took a mass of kikis off, which got mounted up separately. We had a look at them not too long ago. But yeah, so we'll be starting from now to watch the progression of the growths, the number of them, how large they get and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, we're under starters orders. This one is now coming out of its rest, so it's getting watered a bit more often. I'll be introducing feed soon, weak at first and then gradually increasing. Right, Mr. Hairy, everybody loves this one for some reason, Dendrobium cinelli. This is classed as not that easy to grow. I find it easy to grow, I don't find it that easy to bloom. But as I went into winter, this had too many new growths starting to even think about resting it. So this one has had its watering and a little bit of feed kept up through the winter. So it hasn't really had a proper rest. I was expecting some leaf fall through the winter, but I was also expecting these new growths to actually push on. Now this did bloom last year in May. I don't know, I forget how many blooms, but it had a few blooms in May that were very unexpected, because the previous winter it didn't get rested either. It was quite a new plant in those days. So how we're looking at it now, it's basically pushing on those new growths, which I'm quite pleased about. You know, that one's extended quite a bit. And again, there are some even more new growth starting. So it has actually got quite a few new growths pushing on. Those would have stalled if I'd stopped watering and feeding this through the winter. Those new growths would probably have just failed. It hasn't dropped as many leaves as I was expecting, but I still think this is a bit out of season, and I'm hoping that by the end of this growing season it'll kick back in and start losing its leaves at the proper time. I think it lost a lot in the summer last year. I don't see any signs of buds yet. I'm just having a close look while I'm there. I don't see anything that remotely looks like bud, so we may have sacrificed the blooms for the sake of the plant, but there is something coming out of there just on the end of my finger. It could be a root, but that could be a spike. It could be, but we'll have to wait and see. Right, this one's got quite a long name, Dendrobium tetragonum variety giganteum, and when we were looking at this back in December, it was actually in bloom. First time blooming on the latest and largest growth by quite a bit. That growth pushed on quite a lot larger than anything before. This plant has all the hallmarks of being grown on from a seedling, because it does have some very tiny pseudobulbs or canes, and it shows a progression. But this particular new growth pushed up quite a lot bigger than anything before, and it bloomed 2 nice blooms. I'm told not to cut the spike in case it extends. I don't think it will on this particular one, but anyway, we got some blooms. And as it looks now, the blooms are gone. I haven't touched that spike, although it does look like it's died back to me, but I'm leaving it alone as told. But we do have some more new growths pushing on now, 2 quite reasonable ones near the top, and it looks like another one coming out from near the base on the left there. So new growths in places. It's a nice healthy looking plant. I'm quite pleased with this. It produced a really good root system, well attached to the bark, and a sufficient amount of moss on there to keep that hydrated at the moment. But that's what we'll be watching for the next update, is what do these new growths do? How big do they get? And well, do they actually bloom? There's no reason why they shouldn't. Right, the monster Hibiki. Star performer last season, midsummer to right into autumn basically. It was in bloom for an absolute age. Excuse me. And at this point it was starting new growths. At the top on the left was quite a substantial new growth that started quite a bit earlier than the others, but you can see there are a few small new growths near the base. So that was the state of play then. The blooms that came on that in midsummer, if it's going to do that again, quite honestly, it's got a lot more places to bloom this time round. Irrespective of where the new growths are, it's those upside down canes that are likely to bloom. So what we've got now is the new growths have extended quite a bit, as you can see. I think there's this large one that's still growing. I mean, that one's still producing leaves, so it hasn't finished yet. So it's still not full size. There's a little one coming out the base there, another one there, and that one is not actually coming out of the base of the plant. It's actually coming out from about 1 inch from the base of the plant, so you could call it a kiki. And then there's another little one tucked in behind that. So quite a few new growths on this. Quite honestly, if this is going to bloom, it's going to bloom on these canes. Yeah, these didn't bloom back last year, so this is their turn this year. Yeah, and there's quite a few of them, and they're quite large. The blooms last year came out mainly off of the little stumpy little canes. So let's see what happens this year. I'll be interested to see how and when this blooms. Right, now this is a deciduous resting type dendrobium, Dendrobium aphyllum, and the bare cane on the left was the Kiki that I got from Alberto in Pizza, or Italy. I forget which base he was in when he sent this, because he's living in 2 different places with work and that. But he sent me a Kiki, a very large Kiki nonetheless, but that's all I received, so I wasn't expecting the earth off of that. But it did actually bloom. So I was well impressed. I wasn't expecting it, but we did get blooms on that last year. I think it bloomed sort of mid-April time, something like that. But this was just, you know, this was starting its winter rest. The new growth was still fully leaved at the time, back in December. But the feed had been stopped and the watering was being reduced, slowly but surely. Almost finished by now, I would think. As this one comes into this time of year, you can see it's done its autumn thing. It's dumped virtually all of its leaves through the winter. That's expected. It is annually deciduous. Deciduous. So that was the original cane from Alberto, which bloomed. And this is my cane. And if you look, it's got buds from right down here on every single leaf node, right back up to there. Is one lurking under there? Possibly. So we're going to have a lot of blooms on this down the line. It's going to be a good show, albeit on a single new growth. But the buds are pushing away from the cane now, so this needs to be brought back out of its rest, needs water introduced and a bit of feed. And let's push these buds on and get them to a good size. No sign of any new growths on this yet. And I've got no record of when the new growth started last year, whether it was before it bloomed, during blooming or after. I just have no record of it. Perhaps I'll write it down this year. But the important thing on this is to watch the progress of these buds. It looks like an average of 2 buds per cluster. Some may only have 1, but given the number of nodes there, that's going to be a lot of individual blooms on that single cane. It's going to be quite a good show. They don't last long, mind, so we have to take full advantage of these types. They don't last long. Right, and the next one, in fact the last one, this is Dendrobium Prima Donna. It's a nobile type, and this got hacked last year. It was in full flood, second week in March, went to the Wessex show and got a best hybrid in show. It certainly won't do it this year. But basically I split the plant and a large section of that plant went to somebody else. I'm blowed if I can remember who it went to. But if you're watching, let me know who you are and have you got any buds coming on yours? Is it still alive? You know, all that sort of stuff. Give us an update on the piece that went away. But this was the piece I kept, in fact the smaller piece, heavily strapped together to keep it upright. And because it got disturbed and I waited till well after the blooms to repot it, the canes that grew last season are all short. A reasonable number of them, but they all failed to reach their full length because of the major disturbance at the time of year. They should have been pushed on hard. Yeah, a repot did that to those canes. So they were shorter than they should have been. But that was last year's canes. This is as it is now, and the blooms are just opening. This is a very good example. As you can see, that's last year's canes and they're well undersized, but even one of those has got a bud on it. But the blooms that are on here now, you can see those canes are undersized, but they're good canes, they're good strong canes, and they will bloom. But all the blooms this time round are filling in the gaps on those old canes that have already bloomed. If you see what I mean, you can see all the stubby bits where the old blooms were, like on this cane. It's just found a couple of nodes where it didn't bloom last time round, so it's doing it this time round. So most of them are either near the base of the canes or higher up. No sign of new growths yet, not this season's growths anyway. But yeah, this is a good example of a sort of nobly badly disturbed at the time it should have been growing its new canes on heavily. So you can see the older canes, all the places where it's already bloomed, and a few little blooms poking out near the base. Yeah, and the others are right at the top. So there's big gaps where it's already bloomed. Once a node has bloomed, that's it. It will never do it again. Yeah, but it's managed to find a couple of little gaps and filled them in this time round. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had anything at all. So it's filling in the gaps. So don't be in a rush to cut your canes off. Yeah, give them a chance. I'd say, you know, at least 2 years. One good blooming followed by filling in the gaps the following year, something like that. But we'll have to watch the progress on this. I'm expecting a massive new growths on this. It's got a good root system and it should push on nicely through this coming growing season. So there you go, Dendrobiums. A bit of a mix there. You know, you've got Latoria, resting types, semi-resting types, anobili. So the next thing mainly that happens with the Dendrobiums this time of year is they come into bloom, and obviously we'll get to those as and when they do. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Same format as the part 1 of the first round of updates. It seems to work okay, and it's I don't have to break my neck trying to produce a video in that format, so it seems to work okay. And I'll see you for part 3 in the near future. Thanks for dropping by.